What is going on, everybody? And welcome back to a segment on my channel that I call Culinary Cinema. This is the segment on my channel where I talk about movies that are associated with food, and I use my experience in the culinary world and my college degree in the food service industry to discuss those elements of the film. And today I'm going to be doing something that I never thought was humanly possible until I found this online, which is I'm going to talk about two things that I love very much, which is food and then on the other end, found footage horror movies. Yes, this is a found footage horror movie that also centralizes itself in the food world, which I thought was incredibly fascinating. I had no idea that these two things would ever intersect in one way or the other. I didn't know anything about this movie prior to watching it, other than that. I was kind of like looking at the next movie I wanted to do for this series, and this kind of came out of nowhere. So I was like, oh, this is really neat. Like, it's a way to combine a couple of my interests and intersect them. And I'm excited to tell you about this one today. And the film I'm going to be telling you about is the Andy Baker tape. The Andy Baker tape is directed by Brett Latta. In October of 2020, food blogger Jeff Blake and his half brother Andy Baker hit the road on a food tour that had the potential to change their lives. They were never seen again. This is their footage. So, as you guys know, I'm a huge fan of the found footage genre. I always really appreciate found footage because when you don't have a very huge budget or a lot of money to accomplish like a very grand idea, you can make it very small scale and make it very impactful. And like I said, I love food. I worked in the food service industry for a long time. I have a degree associated with food. And so I know a lot about the technical aspects of that. So knowing that that was incorporated in this movie had me very excited. And what I will say about this is wildly entertaining. I never would have expected this movie to be as fun and engaging as it is. It's only like an hour and 10 minutes long. It's a very quick runtime. I watched it for free on Tubi. And what I will say is I really like the way that they incorporated the food blogger and kind of what he was trying to do. But aside from the food elements of the film, it's a really interesting family drama. And it kind of goes a direction that's relatively predictable, but I'm okay with it because it does what it sets out to do incredibly well. And I'm looking forward to telling you about it today. So, the beginning of the film, we are introduced to Jeff Blake, who is actually played by our director. And he is an internet YouTube food personality where he does these blogs, where he goes to restaurants, and he's essentially a Guy Fieri type, where he goes to the restaurant and he gets all this food, he eats it, and reviews it accurately. And he's incredibly popular on the internet, and so popular even that the Food Network has reached out to him to do his own show. And he's incredibly excited about it. He can't wait for that opportunity, while simultaneously he is excited because he found out that he has an estranged half brother that he's never met before. His dad had an affair and had a child, and he was completely unaware of it. And so before he goes out on this adventure to review some more restaurants, he goes to meet his half brother. And when he gets there, he is introduced to Andy Baker, who is seemingly kind of quiet and to himself, but he's a little bit off. But after they spend some time together initially, the two really bond. They have a lot of fun together and they really enjoy each other's company. So much so where Jeff is going to do these reviews, he's doing them with Andy and they're having a lot of fun together and they have really excellent chemistry. And the entirety of the film is the two of them going on this adventure together where they're reviewing these restaurants and things aren't necessarily as they seem. Something always feels a little bit off. And the movie is trying to examine what is it that feels so uncomfortable and off between these two characters. So, like I said, I thought this for a found footage movie, this was incredibly well done and very entertaining. And I want to start with what I think makes the movie work so well, and that is our two lead performances. These guys are incredible. I feel like, when you create a dysfunctional family dynamic where you have these half brothers who they're both clearly very excited about, the prospect of having a family member that they never knew existed, while simultaneously having preconceived notions about the parents and the situation, which creates sort of this very palpable tension between the two characters, which I thought is what makes the movie work very well. There's some very like wholesome moments between the two of them, but there's also some very jarring and unsettling moments, which I think is very representative of family in general. Like these things happen and weird family dynamics are created because of the decisions of parents and things that the children could never be involved in. And I think because of these two actors' really incredible performances, it makes the movie a really breezy watch. Like, I had so much fun watching these characters just interact on screen. And it's interesting because Andy is very kind of mild mannered and to himself, but he has a really overt, insane sense of humor, which is what makes him so incredible. And then you have Jeff, who, like, you can see the passion is there for what he's doing, but he's also kind of smug and he's a little arrogant. And so it's interesting to watch those personalities clash and kind of where it plays out to in the third act. And I really commend both of these actors for delivering truly great performances. Just, I had a lot of fun watching the two of them interact on screen. For a found footage movie, it's shot relatively well. You obviously have some shakier cam footage, like, but what I like about this movie, and it's what I say a lot about found footage, is there's always seemingly a reason for the camera to be rolling. There are two different times during the movie that I was like, okay, why would you turn the camera on? But I was able to suspend my disbelief enough through most of it that it makes enough sense. And that's what I always like, is when you can create that environment where it doesn't feel like people are just rolling a camera for no reason whatsoever. I like that a lot. It worked for me really well. I also like that this is a horror movie. You'd never know it if you just went in right away, except for the title cards, knowing that it's like a found footage, there's a police investigation, but it settles into where it just feels more like a family drama. But what I will say is, from the initial encounter of these two, there's always something sort of sinister underneath the surface. You can feel it in a really palpable way. It exists through the entire runtime of the movie. For when things start blowing out of proportion later on, it makes a lot of sense as to why. You felt it the entire runtime of the film, which is one of the things that makes the movie such an engaging and fun experience overall, is that you feel that tension, so that when things sort of blow up out of control in the third act, that it makes it all the more worthwhile. And as I said, this is part of the Culinary Cinema series, and I love the way they incorporated food. And this film is a lot less about the technical presentation of food and much more about, like, food blogger personas online. And what I think so interesting is the food blogging in 2025 has become like a whole new game where people will just sit in their car and do like food mukbangs and eat large amounts of food, and people enjoy watching that and consuming that content. And this feels like an era where that was really starting to take off. This movie is obviously 2020, so it's right around COVID. There's still people wearing masks. The way they picked up food, it was less about like interviewing people in restaurants and more about just like consuming the food. But what I really like is he was prepping himself for Food Network, and I feel like a lot of the discussions on where to place the camera, how to frame him coming in and out of the restaurant, opening the food a specific way, how he was going to approach eating the food, it's very real to how these shows are presented. If you've ever watched like Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, or one of my favorites not Food Network associated was Adam Richman with Man vs. Food, they're shot in a very particular structure. Even like Anthony Bourdain when he was on TV, they film things very specifically to where they want to capture the essence of the surrounding area, get a feel for the restaurant, and then showcase the food. And I liked that a lot. You could feel it. And obviously, with him being a YouTube persona, little rough around the edges compared to a more higher budget Food Network style television show where they would capture more of the specifics of the food, where he is describing elements that he really enjoys about the food, and then kind of the playful banter back and forth with him and his brother about like how things taste, where Andy doesn't really have the knowledge of food that he seems to have. And I think the approach to that was very representative of that element of the industry in a way that makes sense. Like, it didn't feel like someone who's creating a movie that had no understanding of how all of that works. Like, there's enough of a framework there to where it never really gets technically specific with the food, but the way that he describes it is very similar to a lot of these other people who start these food blogging things, where they might not necessarily have the technical understanding of how certain things are prepared or what makes the dish so special on the technical side, but can understand how to explain things like sweet, savory, salty, like the basic taste components that we all can understand if someone explains it to us. And that's what I liked about this. I thought that the way that the food element of the film was incorporated worked really well, and they didn't need a super high budget to incorporate that element into the movie, other than to spend money on the food that they were eating for the film, which I thought was really neat. And it's just a very fun experience. It goes really off the rails, which you would expect expect in this type of movie. I don't necessarily think it's doing anything super new, but I can appreciate it. And I thought that it was a lot of fun. And I think if you're into found footage movies that actually have really great performances, you'll really appreciate the Andy Baker tape. Have you seen the Andy Baker tape? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed it. And honestly, I'm looking forward to watching it again. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.